to order the meeting of the Maple Run Unified School District Board of Directors for December 18th, 2024. The time is 6:01 p.m. We're at St. Albans Town Educational Center. First item on the agenda is the agenda review. There is one revision that we need to make to the agenda. And it's adding an item under old business, 7C, middle school alternative space update. And I think there are no other revisions, so unless there are objections, the agenda is accepted as revised. Any objections?
It's on the board. It's up.
Hearing none.
Milda, can I just say something for the board? The board members, it's on your agenda that you see, but on the public agenda, it did get posted.
Oh, sweet.
So Milda's just being very cautious and making sure that the public knows for this report.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, because typically it's on both, and yeah. Next item on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance, so please join me for Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the visitor section. Everybody went silent.
You still hear us?
I can now, yep.
Okay.
I couldn't hear a thing there during the Pledge of Allegiance. Usually I can hear it. Okay, visitor section. Are there any persons in the room that wish to address the board?
I don't think so, Milda.
Okay, John, are there any persons online that wish to address the board?
No one has messaged me. I think you're in the clear.
In the clear. Okay, next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. We have minutes in the media packet. Does anyone have the need to pull any of those items out for discussion? Hearing none, the consent agenda is accepted without objection. Next item is item 6, reports to the board. Student board rep report, please. Who's here? Jacoby?
Just Jacoby today. Hi everyone.
Thank you.
So, life is wrapping up, which is why I took one for the team and would come here this evening and let everyone do what they need to do to get ready for the holiday break. We've been pretty busy. We sent out a survey we passed out feedback forms at the BFA play, and we passed out feedback forms to students at the BFA experience night. The one at the play was general, was kind of like, what are we doing well? What are opportunities for growth? And then the feedback form we passed out to students was asking more around the transition to high school. What are some things you're nervous about? What are some things you're excited about? And we hope to have all of that data to you by our next board meeting. We got a lot of good responses, and we're excited to share that with you all. And then in terms of what the Student Voice Committee has been doing lately, we have started making connections with some of the teachers and staff members at our school who run Ada's Closet and who run some of the BFA support things for people. So trying to figure out how we can make that more well known and get maybe more funding or resources to that. So there will be more information on that in the new year as well. And then for our middle school supports group, they met with SATEC today, and it sounds like they had a pretty collaborative meeting. And we're looking forward to meeting with students and not just teachers at the middle school. And we're hoping to have our first contact and touch point with the students mid-January with all 3 schools. So that's kind of where we're headed.
Great. Any questions for Jacoby? Anything else? Jacoby?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you for the report. Moving on to 6B, the fall quantitative student data report. And I believe this is going to be Jason, Alexis, and John, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm going to turn it over to Philip and those folks.
Yeah, I'm gonna get right over to those folks. They know what they're
It's
doing.
rare that you get to sit in the chair.
I have to click.
Yeah, perfect. So John, just before we get started, I think I'd be remiss. I got to go to BFA Experience and want to report to the board as a parent last night of a rising ninth grade. I just want to thank publicly Polly and all the staff at BFA for putting together the night. I know what goes into evening events like that, and the number of staff that were there to greet the students and welcome them in was amazing. So just another bright, shining moment for what we're doing for our students who are rising into the high school. So just, I have a moment. I'd be remiss if I didn't say something, so I just want to shout out to Polly and all the staff at BFA. So, and now we'll get into the fun stuff that we all love. Right, John? We're going to get into our data presentation.
That's true, and this is pretty exciting stuff to talk about tonight. I will just highlight the first half dozen or so slides are really reference material that we've developed about the objectives that we've set and the key measures that we're using to track our progress in those areas from year to year, and actually multiple different ways now. It is exciting that we're at the place where we have not just data from one season to the next, but that we have cohort data that we can look at and data that we can look back at and make comparisons over several years. That has historically not been the situation for us at Maple Run. Right now, we're only able to start doing 3-year comparisons. Prior to that, we actually had different assessments being administered in the same content area and the same grade levels in our different schools. And so not having that alignment really made it impossible for you all as a board to take that systems level look at how kids are doing. And for us as a district leadership team to look at the same data and collaborate. So it's exciting to be able to share some of that tonight. I will say that I'm not going to review all of the reference material at the start in great detail, but it is important just to note that we did have 3 objectives heading into the year. One is about the school culture of high expectations. One is about operational integrity and efficiency. And then the other is about guaranteed and viable curriculum with a focus on literacy and math. And so the data that we're going to dive into really is going to come back to these 3 objectives, which have been modified and used now over a few years.
Can I just point out something really quickly on that slide? So if
Please.
you're wondering why there's 2 different font colors, why there's green and black in there, so the green is what is highlighting what is new for this year. So this is what the leadership team revised and added for our OKRs for this school year and moving forward.
So I'm skipping through that reference material, which is there for everybody to be able to reference. And I'm going to turn it over to Jason to talk about where the data comes from.
Sure. So our success measure data, much of it is being drawn out of Panorama. The attendance data we're looking for over the course of the year that students will have 9 or fewer absences. And Panorama does the math behind the scenes. So when we talk about on track, it means that at this moment in time, does that student attendance pattern put them on track for 9 or fewer absences? And I think the math is, it's like, we've had 60 or 70 days. I think they'd have to be in attendance at least like 65 of those or 67 of them not to have it. So the numbers you'll see are all about extrapolating out, but at this moment in time, they're on track. If we go down and look at behavior, you'll see this report time. There are going to be two lines for that. One inside Panorama is going to be the on track percentage, which means that students have had less incidents on less than 3% of the days that they are in school. Okay, so if you're on track, you've had a behavioral incident, minor or major, on less than 3% of the days in school, that means you're on track. And the 4 majors or less, we've been able to get an even finer grain level in talking with Alexis and John as we're putting this together. We started looking at it, and from my seat being a school, it was looking at that on-track data. It was like, well, that doesn't line up with what I know anecdotally. Because as you'll see later on, if the on-track data for our majors at 4 or less was at 77%, in this building alone with about 650 kids for round numbers, you start going, well, that's 22%. Well, that's 130 kids. Then you go, that's 5 majors or more. You start getting into the 600s. And I get a lot of emails during the day, but I do not get that many from Panorama about majors. And so we were able to dig down further. And as Panorama is a national system, it's kind of software that's rolled out behind the scenes, led to believe that it was doing the math we were looking for, but then learning that that's another hard extract that we have to do. So it was a really good opportunity for us to sit with multiple data points of the same question and really think about, is that the story that I know that's happening right now in our building? And so it's really helped us to just kind of take a look at it in the last 72 hours to go, I think the data story is a little bit deeper than what it is, and it shows a lot more success for what we've been putting in place for Maple Run. So sometimes when you look at data, you get little surprises, and this was a welcome surprise for us. Literacy is coming out of in K-5, they take the M-class assessment, which is based on DIMLS, which is a very rich assessment that's been used in paper and pencil version since I started teaching almost 30 years ago, so it gives us a lot of really good information. Now it's just kind of been digitized. And then we use IXL in 6 through 12. It's another online assessment that the students take. When we're talking about math, we have a new assessment that we're using this year. So we're going to see that we have IM in K-8. That's the illustrative math or imaginative math. It goes by a couple different phrases depending on which part of the website you're on. And then we have IXL in grades 9 through 12. The data point that really is going to help us tell our story is going to be the state level test, the VCAP. And the background on why that is because while we went into this year in this new math program and we're excited about the alignment, we were always a little ambivalent when we adopted about the assessment portion of it. And we knew that going in, which is why the contract that we have with them for that is less than for the materials themselves. So this was kind of our trial year. And so we're really wanting to have another data point on that before we say, yep, this is really doing what we thought it would and give us the information we want. And John can share more on that later, but I just thought I'd take the opportunity to kind of let you know that we're going to be focusing on that one. And then with the SEL survey questions, we're looking at that percent of favorable response and trying to get that common question and expanding that out to the pre-K all the way through 12, and what's that commonality? And that question's really about, do you have a teacher or other adult at school who you can count on to help you and help make you feel safe? That's really what we're looking for from that perspective at the pre-K through 12. So that's kind of the data piece we're going to be looking at, and we're going to...
The only thing I just want to highlight really quickly again for the SEL piece is if you remember in the past, Panorama has only surveyed students in grades 3 through 12. So that sense of belonging question prior to this year was only given to students in those grades, so grades 3 through 12. What we decided to do this year as a leadership team is we wanted to do a true universal screening for sense of belonging with social emotional learning. So we have now surveyed students in pre-K through grades 12. So what that means is we lose some of the national benchmark features in Panorama because they're only evidence-based and backed up to grades 3 through 12. And then we modified the question a little bit to make sure it was developmentally and age appropriate. So the question is the same in terms of the information that it's gathering from students. It's just worded and presented a little bit differently to preschoolers than it is to high schoolers. And that kind of the language to use in those questions was derived directly from our staff in pre-K through grades 2. They were the ones that came together and collaborated and came up with the question that should be asked. So we'll get into that a little bit more on the next slides because now you'll see 3 different data points for our SEL survey response.
I can keep going. Okay. So So attendance, as I mentioned earlier, we're looking at, are we going to have 9 or fewer absences? Are you on track for that? Fall to fall, when we're looking at that, we were at 60% last fall. We're at 57% right now. We are working as an attendance committee, just based on last year's data and this year's, on how do we do those bumps. You may have noticed that you got a message before the Thanksgiving break, just letting folks know, right? Like, we know we're coming off a break. There was an email that went out, just a reminder about that attendance. And sometimes it is hard to come back from break. We know some of our students who struggle with that. And so just trying to get that message out that we're here, that we have supports, and how can we support families and students with that reluctance for attendance. Alexis, you want to talk a little bit about, I'll keep going
No,
about behavior.
I'm happy to do it. So Jason kind of already alluded to this and set up the conversation around behavior. So when we sat down and really got into the weeds with the data, we quickly realized that what Panorama is tracking as percent on track is not synonymous with 4 or fewer major behavior referrals. So then we had to do a lot more exporting of data, and we got some help from Martin Katam on that to really get into the weeds on what percentage of students are we actually talking about that have 4 or fewer major behavior referrals, because that is what we've indicated as one of our success measures in the realm of behavior. So what the top percentage shows you is we wanted to continue to compare apples to apples with what we've been doing for the last 3 years. So the 78%, the 77%, 79%, and 78%, that's looking at the Panorama filter of the percentage of students on track, which is less than 3% of school days have received any behavioral write-up, a combination of minor and majors added together. And if you take that and you disaggregate that down even further and you look at, okay, how many kids are we talking about pre-K-12 that have 4 or fewer major behavior referrals up until these cut points throughout the year, that's when you get into the 90%. So what this says is in fall of 2023, 99% of our students in grades pre-K through 12 from day 1 of school to December 1st have received 4 or fewer major behavior referrals. Winter of 2023, that percentage dipped down a little bit to 95%. Spring of 2024, it dipped down even a little bit further to 91%. And then this fall, so again, from the first day of school, and then we finished pulling this data yesterday, 96% of our students are currently have 4 or fewer major behavior referrals in Panorama, again, pre-K, all the way up through 12th grade. And we even did some further data validity checks on that with like how many actual students are we talking about, and it tracks what we're seeing daily in our schools. So that's just the data for behavior is presented a little bit differently tonight than it has been in the past, but we wanted to kind of give you 2 separate data points because we wanted to be transparent with what we discovered when we really took a deep dive into Panorama.
Just one additional part about that. When you see that 99% in fall of 2023, we had a discussion about, does that seem to track with what you think just on the ground anecdotally? And I think that number is probably closer to that 96. At least I could speak about this building. I think last year with the full implementation of Panorama for reporting and trying to calibrate staff on minor or major and what goes in which bucket, there takes some time to have that calibration and to have that consistency amongst reporting. And so I would say that the 96%, and so I'll be interested to see when we do a winter to winter, what's that next data point look like? Because I think it really does track more towards validity when you're talking in that low to mid 90s is really the valid point. So that's just, again, from anecdotal, like on the ground, doing the work. We've talked a lot about literacy. We've talked a lot about the success that we have found as a district with the Amplify program. And I think as we continue to work with our K-5 implementation, we're going to continue to see growth in that. It's not uncommon for programs after the first year of implementation to have a little bit of a stall. But we also know when looking at this number that this was administered in the first few weeks of school. And so this is also going to be accounting for summer slide, which is an all too common thing that occurs for learners when they come back into school. And so again, the winter assessment is coming up in January. And so we'll be very curious to see how do our winter to winter numbers compare. Were we able to recapture some of that slide for a greater percentage than the 7% that increased last year? So what does that recapture look like as we're moving forward into that winter? So we're really interested in what that number is, because that'll tell us again about the integrity of implementation. It'll tell us about the type of programming we're having. Our 6 through 12, go ahead, jump.
This is something we're going to talk more about actually when we get to another part in the presentation. So I think it's worth just being super clear about it. When we make a comparison for fall data, we want to look from this fall to last fall, which are the two green columns that are up there. So when we're looking at that K to 5, we're comparing that 37% to the 31 from last year, and the 37% 6 to 12 to the 17% from last year. You can also make comparisons to the areas in between where we made all that growth last year, but you can't make one-to-one comparisons between either winter or spring of last year and this fall because of what Jason talked with summer learning loss, which is it's a phenomenon we see in all schools. But one thing we'll talk about later is our vulnerable populations are more susceptible to it than other populations. So our students who are on IEPs or ESCs, and our data also indicates our students who qualify for free and reduced lunch, those students experience greater learning loss by far in the summer than students who are not part of those groups. And so that's just something to keep in mind as we go through the rest of the data.
Thank you, Joe. And again, you can see the fall-to-fall comparison with our 6 through 12 students, and really encouraged by the growth we're seeing, by the commitment of the staff to make that a priority for those students. And again, look forward to seeing, what does that winter-to-winter comparison look like? Because really one data point isn't making a line, but multiple data points for year-over-year time will tell us, are we on the right trajectory with our growth? Our math data, you can see that, again, we're looking at a percent on grade level. If you look at the K-8, you look fall to fall. Again, we have an asterisk there because we're jumping over to our VCAP results at this point, John. Yes, or yeah.
So
remind me on the slide.
You may remember a little bit less than a year ago when the math committee came to the board and we purchased the IM math program. We made a 7-year commitment to the math program. That implementation has been very smooth. But at the same time, we actually only asked for approval for a 1-year purchase for the assessment program. The actual core math program was the preference for math teachers by far, more than 88% of them. That was their first choice. But we really ended up with a 3-way tie on the assessment program, or a near tie. And so what we did after that is some engagement work with teachers around what they were looking for from the assessment program, and there were some substantial differences in costs. And so we did go with the same provider as the math program for the assessment. It had the benefit of being the more financially responsible choice, as well as being linked to the math program. But we were not sure that it could fully deliver on the promises. We've all been in situations where things have been under-promised or over-promised and under-delivered. And the math committee is not at the point of saying that's where we are now. But after this January assessment, we are going to have to evaluate whether or not it is the assessment program we continue with. And part of that is the methodology that they utilize. So if you are, no matter what grade you're in, if you're taking this math assessment, which we use as a screener, but also as a diagnostic to help teachers respond to student need, if you are not able to answer certain foundational questions, the test will stop you. And that is designed to prevent students from being frustrated, but it actually prevents us from getting access to all of the data that we need. Because, and I know we've talked about this before in this room, we actually have, especially in the high school grades, quite a few students who are doing grade level math but have foundational gaps. And so with this new assessment program, we're not actually able to assess how well they're doing grade level math, because when they hit one of their foundational gaps, the program stops them. They have supposedly adjusted this for us for the January assessment, and we'll see shortly how that plays out. So what we're using as a placeholder right now is state assessment data, because we know the assessment data we have from this fall isn't a true representation of the ability of our students to do grade level math. It's just an imperfect measure, but I just wanted to be super transparent about that one. Sure.
So just to sum that up, so the math curriculum so far people are happy with.
Yes.
And that's the thing that we've made a 7-year commitment to. The assessment is the thing that is currently questionable, and that is the thing that, if it turns out, if we're not satisfied with it after this year, that is the thing that we can shift to something else.
Yes, it's actually, it's very easy for us to make a change with the assessment provider. It would be extremely difficult to make a change with the core program provider. And so if we were going to have an issue, we're having the kind of issue that we would prefer to have. The implementation of the math program has gone super smoothly. The PD has been highly reviewed. Teachers and teams have been working through it quite well. And actually, as part of the feedback we've collected, really the only consistently negative feedback we've gotten has been about the lack of data from the assessment program, not from the actual math program itself.
And so, if it continues, like, there's theoretically no problem with switching the assessment won't have an impact on the curriculum.
Not at all.
So John, are you saying at this time you are able, or you're still working with them, like, to be able to hit, all fourth graders start on the fourth grade math, right? Instead of starting at first grade math, right? Like, so you're getting to that, you're working that out with them?
That's right. So we're still working with them. The real proof will be when we see what comes out of the January assessments. I have no reason to believe that they haven't made the adjustments they've said they've made, but just because I've also never been put in a place where I had to make a data substitution like this in a presentation to the board.
Yeah.
I wanted to be really clear about why that was the
Yeah,
case.
the other information's good too, right? It's good to find out where people have gaps, but.
Absolutely.
So not data connected, but it is fantastic that in Maple Run, all teachers, no matter the building, are working with the same core program. It's not luck or happenstance that teacher A in one building's teaching this and teacher B is teaching something totally different, and the conversations across the district are phenomenal. So I have a lot of hope that it'll continue to be beneficial to all students, and we'll be able to show you that growth over time. So it's really an exciting time for us. SEL data, we began that with a discussion about that question, so I'm going to turn that over to Alexis.
Yeah, so if you look at fall 2023 to fall 2024, the parentheses in fall 2024 now have 3 different percentages. So the 80% is the exact same survey for grades 3 through 12 that we administered last fall. So if you want to do a direct comparison, it's 80% to 80%. So there's no percentage of growth. But then if you add in the pre-K through K survey and then the grades 1 and 2 survey, that's where you get those other 2 numbers. So the favorable response rate for students in pre-K and kindergarten was 97%. And then the favorable response rate for students in grades 1 and 2 was 94%. And then if you take the average of those 3, that's what gets you to the 84%. So it shows like it's a 4% area of growth, but yes and not really, because it's a little bit of a different survey, and we surveyed more grades this year than we did last year.
And it tells its own story.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Yep. And does this me? This is me, right? Sure. So, and then this slide, what we want to highlight here is, again, the fall to fall difference is the second column, which we've talked a lot about already. But then we wanted to add in an additional point of the 3-year growth that John started to mention at the start of this conversation. And that's what the green column represents. So we've seen, if you look at fall of 2021 to fall of 2024, we've actually seen a 35% increase in our attendance data, even though the fall to fall comparison looks like a decline. Behavior, we've seen, again, if you just look at the percent on track in Panorama, it's stayed static and pretty consistent since fall of 2021. But if you look at the students with 4 majors or less, we've seen a 21% increase. Literacy is a 60% increase. Math, I'm gonna direct that to you with the 255% change. I'll let you speak more to that.
Yeah, so this is one of those things, you have to be careful. I would love to just say 255%, we're killing it. And I feel like the teachers are doing this incredible work, the kids are doing this incredible work. But it's important to note where we're catching the trough from post-COVID learning loss in our measurements, right? So I mentioned before, we didn't have unified measurements before, we didn't have unified programs before, and so coming out of COVID, that was an obstacle for us. And so when we started aligning and getting reliable and valid assessment data, what we saw very early in the beginning are these troughs where it was a real shift to use these very rigorous assessments, and we were shocked at how low the percentage of students on grade level were. So those are some of you've been on the board through this whole time period, and you remember those kind of what felt like crisis meetings where we're talking about 9% of kids are on grade level in math, right? And so that is actually the trough that we're referencing here. So we're making a comparison from where we are now, which is still not as good as we want to be, to when we were really at the trough, the valley, or however else you want to describe, the opposite of a peak, as we were measuring learning loss coming out of school closures and things like that. So it is accurate to say we've grown that much, but I just want to be clear that it was really from a very challenging and difficult place. So I don't, it's worthy of celebration. I just wanted to be clear.
And then the last data point on that slide is just, again, if you look at the favorable response rate on our SEL survey from when we started giving this survey out to students 3 years ago, we've seen a 17% growth, again, from fall of 2021 to fall of 2024.
I just have a quick question because percentages mess with my head a bit. So the percentages in the green column are measuring, where the percentages are representing growth of percentages. So like if a number was 15% and now it is 30%, then that is 100% growth, correct?
So I can answer, so we'll use math as the example. So we're up 22 points from our, not percent, we're up 22 points of from 3 years ago, our fall measurement.
Yeah.
And so because it was so low, when we take the growth, which is the 22, and then divide by where we started, we end up with a really large percentage, the 255.
Okay, so it's the percentage of growth.
Yep.
Okay, so
So it's, for example, they keep going with math. We have 255% more students on grade level than we did 3 years ago.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Yep. I think this one is me. So there are a couple real successes. There's actually quite a few successes to point out, but I think one of the ones that is kind of shocking is the way that aligning these programs and bringing teachers together across the district to work together on the same programs and the same instruction and assessment methodologies is the way we've been able to eliminate the historical differences in performances between our schools. We all know that there is a historical community perception that city school underperforms town and Fairfield. And that 3 years ago, that was certainly borne out here when we looked at which schools had statistically significant differences in performance. If you remember when we first started using this as a way to talk about the differences between schools, Fairfield was outperforming in every category and City was underperforming in every category. And you can see now really what we're left with. All of the schools have been growing, so it's not that Fairfield has declined, it's just that City School and Town School have been growing at a slightly faster rate. City School at the fastest rate. And so what we're seeing now is really the elimination of these meaningful differences between the schools and their performance, which is super encouraging and I will actually say very uncommon for school districts to accomplish in a short period of time. So I think a lot of credit goes to the teachers for working together across the district to make this happen.
This is just, go ahead, John.
So there's a little bit of foreshadowing here. So with the statistically significant differences, we also ended the year last year, spring 2024, really celebrating how this used to be very full of groups that were underperforming. And we really were able to remove almost all of the groups that started on this list with a statistically significant difference. And so we were left with some categories with free and reduced lunch, which is what that FRL stands for, having a statistically significant underperformance, and in one area our ELL students underperforming, but in another outperforming. And so this was huge growth for us again, and a very positive thing to report. But what I had foreshadowed earlier with summer learning loss impacting vulnerable students more significantly than others, you can see as we transition to looking at our groups that have statistically significant differences in performance this year, you can see some of our groups have reemerged onto this document, and they're the groups that I had mentioned earlier. So our students who are meeting our low income metrics, or basically students on a plan. So our students on IEPs and ESDs, as well as a few others. And so what this really says to us is that those are the groups that struggled with greater learning loss over this summer. I don't know
I do have a question, but I'm not sure where to place it. We were talking about the learning loss and how the current assessment is showing the gaps they have. Is the curriculum more of a spiral method, or is it more mastery? Is it where we're all going back and like the kids that cannot pass, say, first grade or third grade math, they don't know they should. Does the curriculum go back and spiral it into it, or is it just mastery based, they missed it, they keep going?
Yep, so both literacy and math programs now have a different approach, but a spiral aspect to them. What I was mentioning with the assessment program is that as those foundational gaps emerge, the program stops assessing. So we have an idea of some of their gaps, but actually not a holistic view of all of their gaps. So if we compare that to the literacy program and the way that assesses students in literacy, we're able to look from grade level all the way back to pre-K skills and see very clearly where the gaps are. That's what we're missing from the current math program.
Okay, we're gonna switch, because now I'm gonna get real jazzed. All right, I get real excited about this stuff. I'm actually gonna flip the order, so can you go to the next slide? So because we are talking about student data, I wanted to embed some specific information around our two in-house alternative programs that are newly developed. So the Lighthouse, which has been up and running, this is now the third year, and then I'll give kind of where we're at with the projected 5-8 alternative program. So I did some data pulling about the Lighthouse. So again, that's just a high school program, students grades 9 through 12. It's connected to BFA, but it is off-site, so it's not physically in the BFA building. And I looked at the last 3 years. So again, this program opened in the 2022-2023 school year. And I wanted to show you all enrollment numbers over the last 3 years, as well as the dropout prevention rate and then the graduation rate, because again, we are talking about high school students. So basically what this information is showing you is that in the first year, there were a total number of 11 students that enrolled and engaged in the program. And keep in mind that the slated capacity of the program since the beginning was always 16. So we were a little under what we were hoping in year 1, over in year 2, and we're a little under right now, but it's only December, and I will tell you more kids will come throughout the year. So for year 1, again, we had a total number of 11 students accessing the program. The dropout prevention rate that year was 91%. So how that was calculated, it is basically the number of students enrolled and in attendance, and then compared to the number of students that didn't drop out. So 91% of those 11 students successfully completed the year and attended the Lighthouse for the duration of that school year. And then if you look at graduation rate for the first year, there's 2 percentages there for a reason. So if you look at true graduation rate, so the students in the program that year that are seniors that actually graduated, you get to your 60%. However, I don't feel like that's an accurate number because what happened that year is we had students go to Job Corps, which is actually a huge success and a huge achievement for those students, but they technically aren't coded as graduated from BFA. So then if you look at the students who graduated and went on to Job Corps, that bumps up to your 80%. So I just didn't want you to think that the 40% from the 60 meant they dropped out and didn't graduate. So that's the discrepancy there. Then if you look at last year, there was a total number of 20 students who accessed the program. The dropout prevention rate there was 90%, and then every senior in the program last year graduated from BFA. And then this year, again, we're only in December. We currently have 13 students in the program. And as of last week, the dropout prevention rate is 92%. And obviously, I don't have a graduation rate for you yet this year. But I'm happy to give that to you in June or next fall so we can update that information. And then under the total number of students, if you're wondering what the number 2 represents, that's in parentheses. So those are the students that we actually successfully transitioned back to BFA from a more restricted placement. So it's either an out-of-district alternative school or transition them back from a residential placement. So again, that was one of the needs and one of the reasons why the Lighthouse was created. And I just wanted to show you that we've successfully re-entered 4 students back into the BFA community that were not a part of our community prior to the Lighthouse. And I don't know if you want budget numbers, but I do have savings. So if you want that information, happy to share that with you as well. Yes. Okay, I thought I would get nods. So what I did is I looked at, again, I just totaled up year 1 with our current year right now. And what's different about the 5-8 alternative program, because it's not in existence yet, this is real actual cost savings. The Lighthouse has saved the district just over $350,000 just from the 4 students that have either transitioned back from a more restrictive setting or that we've prevented from going out because they were on a wait list to be outplaced, and then we pulled them from the wait list. So it's about $354,000. And then if you want to go backwards, so if you go to the 5-8 alternative program, again, these are all just projections because we actually aren't up and running and we technically aren't open yet. But what our student data is showing us is if we are able to get up and running ASAP, we have 5 students currently slotted in grades 5 through 6 to start right on day 1. 100% of those students are in IEPs, so they're in special education. And then if you look at grades 7 through 8, we have 6 students rostered to start on day 1 of that program. And there's a little bit of a mix when you look at special education or supported by a 504 plan. And again, if you remember when we initially talked about the capacity of this program, it was 10 and 10, so it was a total of 20 students. And I just want to acknowledge and recognize that these numbers are obviously much less than that, and that's intentional because we don't want to fill it on day 1. We want to leave room to grow and be able to meet the needs of students that struggle in the heavy winter months, because we know just from the day-to-day what we see from students, January, February, and March can be really, really tough months in terms of behavior. So we want to be able to catch those kids and have space to support them right away. Staffing update, I'm sure some of you are wondering where we are with staffing. So we have hired and filled every position except one of our classroom teachers, which is huge, and it's a critical need. We are actively refreshing, reposting that job, and we'll interview candidates as they come. But I do want to say that we have a plan. So what is beautiful around our current staffing model is we have staff that were hired in a different position that have a teaching endorsement in the content areas we need. And our one classroom teacher that we did hire is actually endorsed in every content area. So we have some wiggle room, and we have the ability to think creatively short term to fill that gap with the staffing that we have hired. So even though it is technically a vacancy, I don't want you to think that means we're not going to teach that content, or we're not going to have someone licensed to deliver that curriculum to students, because that's not the case.
So hypothetically, if this program was ready to open up in January, and hypothetically we could get it going even without that one classroom teacher hired?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah, we have. So how we've been planning and working behind the scenes is we've been operating like when we get the go-ahead to open, we need to be ready to open. So we have kind of plan A, plan B, and plan C on how to make this happen. And the other thing that I will say around the staffing piece is we have hired staff at different points throughout this school year, and I just want to be really upfront and transparent. I wish other principals were here because I think I would want them to chime in directly. Those folks have not just been sitting at central office doing paperwork. So we have actually been able to really triage and support all of our schools with some critical vacancies and staffing shortages with these folks. So some of the things I would like to highlight is one of our hires actually filled the long-term PE sub position here at SATEC and was able to serve in that role, which was I don't want to speak for you, but that was a huge support for SATEC to be able to put someone in that role. We have another staff who is actually filling a leave position as a special educator at City School, and that has been a critical need. And then we have 2 other staff that have filled vacant behavior interventionist positions across our buildings. So we've been doing rotating schedules. They filled the vacancy at the Lighthouse. The Lighthouse was down their one behavior interventionist for the start of the year, so we pushed someone in there and worked out of the Lighthouse until that vacancy was filled. And then we had someone triage some pretty high intensive student needs at City School because behavior interventionist resigned and left. So I just want to be super transparent that The staff that we've hired have been unbelievably flexible, very patient, and have shown a lot of grace with getting this program up and running, and have been in every single one of our school buildings filling a need of some kind. I think Fairfield, they didn't actually fill a need, but when they were able, they popped up to Fairfield and did a lot of shadowing of the Student Support Center, of HHB investigation process, all of that in on-the-job training. So I just wanted to highlight that. I'll wrap it up, Bill. You know I could talk about this stuff all day. And then I do have numbers again. Again, the fiscal part of the 5A alternative program is solely projected because we're not up and running yet and the students aren't in the program. But our projected savings for this year, so if you look at, let's say January, if all goes well, January until June, we're looking at about $360,000 of savings. And again, we're targeting students that are currently on wait lists for out-of-district placements. Yes.
So when you say, can we just get a clarification? When you say a savings of $350,000 or $360,000, are you saying that it's paying for the full program and you're saving the school $360,000?
So that's a good clarification. So I did not subtract like staff salaries.
Because then is it really a savings?
So I can get you that information. That's real easy math to do. I just wanted to show you what the district was already projected to spend on student educational cost in the absence of this program. And then the second year, so again, that would be a full year of projected savings is, I think it's 1.1, yeah, it's $778,000 for next year. And then if you add,
I'm sorry, for the middle school?
yes.
That's a project, okay.
For next year, because that would be a full year program. And again, these are students that we're also scheduling to return from out of district placement. And those transition conversations are already happening with those teams. So if you were to add this year, January to June, and then next year, the full year, you're looking between $1.1 and $1.2 million in student cost that we would now support in-house instead of paying out of district.
So that's student cost, not like Joanne was saying?
Yes. So I'm happy I can connect with Bree. She holds those numbers, and I absolutely can give you the difference in what we're paying in salary and other things. It's very easy to do.
Great.
So that's
Any
the,
questions for the team, or are you done your presentation? I don't want to interrupt.
no, that's the end. I just wanted to pause and see if there are any questions on that or any of the earlier pieces that we could address for the board.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thanks, Jason, Alexis, and John for that presentation. We're going to move on the agenda to old business. And item 7A is draft number 2 of the budget. And you have that in attachment 7A in your packet. And this is the presentation of Bree and Bill, probably mostly Bree, but Bill's there for backup.
You got the right, who's the brains here? It's Bree. It's Bree. I'm waiting for John to bring up the presentation. There we go.
Okay.
You have much of this in your packet, and you have the PDFs, which are probably easier to read than the presentation, but when Bree and I were prepping this, we said, hey, let's do a presentation, so especially for audience members. I do want to remind everyone in the audience that sees this recording, we have a button there's a link right off top of the website that says school budget. Anything you see here tonight, all the PDFs that have been given to the board, they're all up on that part of the website. So go there. Literally, Aaron was changing it this afternoon with the latest updates. And Aaron's here tonight help us make sure we got everything put in the right place. So she's been doing a great job of making sure it's really accessible for folks. Bree and I talked about, I'm gonna kind of set a little context. I'm gonna turn it over to her. She'll give you all the details and the hard work, and then I'll bring it back to what questions we have for the board. So that's kind of our little plan tonight. John, if we can just go ahead, you'll see the agenda here, which is a little bit of the context, the expenditure revenues, what's causing the changes in the budget, and then we need some direction from the board. So we have a question from the board, and then what our next steps are, and we'll go from there. So one of the things that I think is important, John, if we go to the next slide, when we think about the budget should tell, I was taught in my master's degree eons ago by a great professor, Jack might have known him, but Ray Prue, when he taught my budgeting class, he said, your budget should tell the story of your district. So our budget should tell that we're meeting the goals of which the district has set for us. And so I just wanted to bring those back, is that's really what we're trying to do here. The budget is our way of saying where our resources going to do that. So just wanted to bring it, I think it's always important to put those goals back up. So yeah.
Bill True, I actually know who Ray Prue was too.
Yeah, okay, sorry, no,
Scary.
yeah,
Scary.
yeah. Ray helped a lot of administrators and educators in their learning for many, many, many years. The other thing that the board, you asked us back in November to bring you 3 models. Create a level service budget, and I'm using educational ease, so I'll say that means using the same structure that we have in FY25, move it to FY26 and say what are the inflation factors. So that's the details that you're getting tonight. And then you said, what would it take to get to the governor's request for a 3% budget increase? Keep spending at 3%. So we'll tell you that. That's in here tonight. It's in your packet. And then what would it take to get to a level funded? Basically, if we took the $76.2 million budget that we have this year and we put that into FY26, what happens? So we have that for you tonight as well. At the last meeting, we didn't have that third piece. So we have that here tonight. So now you get to hear from Bree, which is probably much nicer than myself. So we'll turn it over to Bree.
So this, what you're seeing right here, this was presented back in October, and this document is used still also for the areas of unknown of the assumptions that still haven't come out. Type of things like the gas and the electricity, things like that. We have a good idea, but there's still some times where we were using these as assumptions. And then here, excuse me, is the second draft. That just turned, sorry. So this is the second draft of the budget. So in this draft, we have a proposed expenditure of $79,296,204, which is a 4.02% increase over the FY25 budget. Within here, we also have adjusted the long-term weighted ADM from what the state of Vermont has given us. This number is not frozen yet, so it could change again, and it's most likely bound to change a little bit again, but they have a good idea that this is a very good number to be using for our budgeting. Which means with the educational spending and the long-term weighted ADM, it has brought up our per pupil spending to $15,331, which is a 7.37% increase over FY25, because FY25 was $14,278 per pupil.
Rita, can I give a couple of things in there?
Absolutely.
So first of all, on the presentation, you'll see if you're looking at the slide on the screen, it says 4.99%. That percentage is wrong. It is 4.02, as Brianne just said. We know we didn't get time. We literally found that like an hour ago, and we get time to change the presentation. But on all the documents on the website, that's been changed. And in the board's packet, you have the 4.02 in there. So just wanted to make sure people were like, wait a minute, which one are we talking about here? And the second one, the long-term weighted average, long-term weighted ADM has gone down from where it was last year. It's almost down 100 students. One of the things that we know is that the way students are being counted for free and reduced lunch this year compared to last year is different. And so it's lowering the long-term weighted average for every district that I've talked to. So that's everyone in the Champlain Valley. I haven't talked to everyone in Vermont. But what we heard from Brad, I think you heard from Brad James, who correct me wrong, is that that's going down in every district.
Yes.
And that projection was not used in the tax commissioner's letter setting the yield for a dollar yield. So it's actually, they're expecting there to be more weighted students than there actually are, which that's an inverse relationship. So if they actually use what there was, that'll raise that dollar yield. We did not put anything like that in this calculation. We always try to be as conservative as possible with these, so we're showing the worst possible tax increase. We don't try to play with any of those numbers.
So just as a refresher, as the yield goes up, the tax rate goes down.
Yes. Yep. So I just thought that was good to know. I don't think there's anything we can do about it, but that's something that's happening is almost every district has seen their long-term weighted average go down because it's a new way. What happened, there's a lot of, I could go into it, but I'm going to leave it in the parking lot to let someone really wants to know, but it's a different way of counting free and reduced lunch than there was.
Yes. So down below a little bit more is the budget breakdown of wages, health insurance, employee benefits, contracted services, tuition, transportation, property services, supplies and equipment, and then other dues and fees, including principal and interest payments. So you'll see that 53.3% of the budget is just salaries, with a 15% increase, or a 15% of the budget is going to health insurance. So you'll see that this is the 4.02% increase from FY26, or from FY25 to FY26. Are there any questions on this before we move on?
Bree, just,
Yeah.
I hate to nitpick here, I'm just asking, last night I thought I heard you say 166 for ESP staff. Because we just, kind of beat that for a while.
I'll have to get back to you. I'm not sure if this is including the unfilled positions also that we have in here as
I
well.
didn't realize they were all in that category. Okay.
Correct, yeah.
Gotcha.
So, not all of
I'll
them.
have to check it. I know where you're getting the 166 from
We
our
just did it
conversation last night.
Yeah,
Right.
I was just wondering.
Yep.
Yes,
We'll have to check that.
Thank you.
absolutely. So, oh goodness, this is very tiny. Sorry, everyone. So hopefully it's bigger on your computer. So this is the summary of the expenditures for the FY26 budget. After we get done this budget presentation, I would like to circle back to this spreadsheet, if that's okay with everybody, so that I could do the quarterly report for FY25, because it's already built right into this spreadsheet. But this first page is the local expenditures that we are budgeting for, and you'll see on here that I have the FY24 actual expenditures, the FY25 working budget, along with the FY25 actual and covered expenses, and the proposed budget all the way over to the right side, which also includes the percentage of change over the prior year. That is the percentage of change over the prior year from FY26 proposed budget to the working budget in FY25. So on here you will see the percentage increases. I do want to point out that the curriculum and instruction services is a high number, and we're going to see that again in this presentation. And that was due to us doing reallocation of staffing. And I need to look into this a little bit more too, and review with principals and John to make sure that the staffing that we have as curriculum and instruction services, so instructional coaches, are in the correct line. And and or if they need to move up to the direct instruction line. But you will see on here also that there is that 21% decrease in the long-term debt due to us paying off the city school bond. So, and then moving on to the next page is a continuation of the expenditures for the FY26 budget. This one, the funding sources included on this page is the special education budget and the Northwest Career and Technical Center budget. And you'll see on here, which will show up again as well, the out-of-district placement is proposed to be up 22.9% over the previous year. And the student supports, which includes behavior personnel, occupational and physical therapists, visual impaired students, is up 33.4%, or budgeted to be up 33.4%. And then student transportation for special education is expected to be up 69.04%. And that's due to the outplacement of the students and getting them to the schools that they're attending.
John, can you advance it one slide? Should be ahead.
Charlie, did you have a question?
Is it fair to state that the student transportation and the student supports costs are linked, and that's why they're?
I would say that the out of district placement and the student transportation are linked.
Okay.
But the student supports also include the paraeducators.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Does that take into account the alternative school opening? We'll still have that many projected out-of-district placements?
We're actually, I did not project that. We had taken those out because we're projecting that they're not going to be in here. So those out-of-district students are not included or reflected in this. Yes.
Maybe another way to say is that if they're an alternative, if they're going to go to the middle level alternative program, we took them out of that and have a tuition next year.
So this is over and beyond.
This is over and beyond what's going to go there.
Yes.
So, and I don't know if this is, I'm just gonna ask this question, doesn't need to get answered right now, and I know that you don't have the answer to this question. At least I wouldn't think that you would have the answer to this question. So are we designing programs for students who would otherwise be sent out of district, or are we designing programs for students who might be dropping out or not participating in school?
So can I have Alexis come forward? Let's talk. You can answer that part.
Can I answer from here?
I just want to make sure it gets on the mic. That's what I say.
Oh, no, I'll go up there.
No, you can come right up to a table here, but just so you get a mic. I just want to make sure it gets on the recording.
That's fine. I think it's a great question, and that's where, so I want to remind folks that the Lighthouse and the middle level alternative program are completely two different focus. So that's why the staffing model is very different at both of those programs. So when the Lighthouse was initially drafted and developed, the intention and the focus was dropout prevention and supporting graduation. Whereas the middle level program is a behavioral focus. So that focus is either bringing kids back that are outplaced or preventing our students that are currently on wait list or projected to be outplaced. Which is why Bree, Andrea, and I spent a lot of time reviewing and re-reviewing spreadsheets, list, contractual cost, and we took out the students that would access the middle level alternative program.
I guess I would push back on that a little bit. I love the idea of a prevention dropout program. No issue with it whatsoever. I don't think that's how that was sold to the board initially. I would say that we were absolutely under the impression that it would reduce or eliminate out of district placements for students. they get turned into something else. But I don't believe that that's what it was originally intended or originally educated. You know, we were not educated by that initially.
So I would just provide a little more context in a different way in response to that. So you have both in the sense of your main focus and your main goal can be on student engagement and dropout prevention, and at the same time, you also prevent students from being outplaced, and you support students with returning to their community. So it's not necessarily an or situation, but I am very, very confident that we were transparent from the very beginning when we talked about the Lighthouse around what we were looking for staffing, who we were looking to hire, and who could be supported with our in-house behavioral programs at BFA. Because the difference about our high school and with our pre-K-8 programs is they already had 2 distinctly developed in-house special education alternative programs that could meet the specific behavioral needs of kids, depending on their profile and depending on their diagnosis. So we weren't looking, what we were looking to do at BFA was to fill a void and to fill a gap. And there wasn't a gap in the behavioral focus at that time, three years ago. What there was a gap in, it was a smaller setting on campus for kids where due to their mental health, the anxiety of coming into a building the size of BFA and the complexities of just the physical space was too overwhelming for students from a mental health perspective, and we were losing them. And we were losing them at alarming rates. So we were looking to create a smaller, more intentionally, socially, emotionally focused program to not have kids continue to drop out at the rate that they were. And then we did a very different lens with the middle level program based on our behavioral data and based on the students that we were seeing increasingly be referred for out of district educational placements. And again, keep in mind that this budget, correct me if I'm wrong, Bree, is pre-K through 12. So we haven't even talked, and we're not talking about programming for students in K4. And I will tell you the behavior needs in K4 are also quite intensive and high. And we don't have a program for that. So they wouldn't be removed from your numbers, no budget.
So, are there any questions on any of the expenditures before we move on to the revenues? No. Okay. So on this page, you will see that the revenues, I'm sorry again that this is so tiny. You will see the proposed revenues. Everyone on the right side that has an X is a revenue that we know we are going to receive. So we know of 5 revenues at this point that we are going to receive for FY26. So in here, I have put in very conservative proposed revenues to help us understand and know how much educational spending we're going to need. As the numbers come in from the Agency of Education, letting us know the revenue streams or the confirmation of the revenue streams, I will update it. So hopefully the education spending of $59,819,928 will hopefully go down. But at this point, I'm not certain of what we're gonna pull in.
And Bree, usually don't we have these numbers by now?
Typically, we do have these numbers, or more of these numbers, but there are some staff members that are no longer at the Agency of Education who would typically provide it to us. So they have Brad James working at the AOE. He came back from retirement to help AOE out in the Ed Finance division. So we can get some of these numbers. He is working hard to get this information to us, but he's a one-man show right now. So, yes.
I just have a question on the tuition income line.
Absolutely.
The FY '25 budget is 2.7 million and FY '26 is 2.6 million. We haven't received anything for FY '25. Are we expecting to get basically like a massive payment for, or a massive amount of revenue in the next few months?
So yes, we should be receiving about half-ish from the sending schools. So like Sheldon, Northern Mountain Valley School District, Albert or Grand Isle Albert. We have to bill them and they then send us tuition money for the sending students. We haven't sent those bills out yet. We're still working on finalizing those bills and they should be going out in the mail before Christmas. But that's our plan and hopefully they'll turn around and send us checks really quick.
Okay, just
Yes.
making sure we weren't counting on $2.6 million that we didn't know if we were going to get.
Yes, no, and I did budget lower for the tuition income for next year because our long-term weighted ADM number has dropped a little bit and we'll see a little bit later on in a different part of the board packet, the sending school numbers. So just having that idea of what our tuition is and the student numbers for that.
So Bree, what are the X's on all the way on the right for those three
Yep, so
items?
those X's are the confirmed revenue amounts that we know that we're going to get.
Oh, okay.
Yes, yes. So we know of 5.
5 we have confirmed, the rest conservative
Yes.
estimates.
And we have a good idea as to some of them, but they're not like a set in stone amount that we know we're going to get.
Yeah, more of a comment, like, you were talking about the budget telling the story.
Yeah.
And so when I look at like out-of-district placement, student support, student transportation, all of that increasing, to me, the story I hear is that kids are showing up like not ready to learn. Like they're coming to school somewhat, and stories I hear from teachers, like preschoolers who aren't familiar with books yet, like kind of dysregulated behavior. So all this money we're spending, it's like to fix things that we don't really have control over at the
So
district.
can I have you hold that for a bit? We're going to get to analysis in this presentation a little bit, and it was great that we had some data presentation earlier. Because there's actually, I think, a pretty good, at least from my point of view, there's a really poignant story that's there. So let's keep going. I like your question, Jess, but I don't want to answer it yet till we get into some of the analysis of the budget that we put in that literally you wouldn't have seen until tonight because we literally were doing the analysis today. So I think it's a great story of like what is the budget telling us along with the data we saw tonight.
Well, I'm just wondering, like, if we're gonna invest in something, it seems like it needs to be before they even start school. Like, what can we do so kids are showing up ready and regulated? Because otherwise, we're just trying to like catch up all the time.
Are there any questions on the revenues before we go on? Before I turn it over to Bill?
Okay, so we're starting to get some analysis of what we're seeing from a budgetary point of view. If you look at our 3 funding areas, which are regular education, special education, and the tech center, regular education is about 70% of our budget. And this is from a budgetary, this is from a dollars point of view. Special education is about 25% of our budget, and the tech center is about 5% of our budget. But where is the change occurring? There's about a little over a $3 million change from this current fiscal year to the one being proposed at 4.02%. 50% of that change is coming from regular education. And so it's about 70% of our budget. Almost 44.5% is coming from special education and 7% is coming from technical education. So if it were the distribution of our budget and there were equal increases in all areas, those 2 pie charts would look the same. Okay, so you're seeing a little bit bigger in the Northwest Career Center than what is in the budget, is its percentage of the budget. And you're seeing a little bit, and you're seeing quite a bit more in, sorry, I said that backwards. Yeah, I think the graph is labeled wrong. That's how you look at John.
Yep.
The green is regular education, it says special education, and the orange is special education, it says regular education. So sorry, it's wrong up there on the chart, that needs to be fixed. The green is the regular education, the orange is special education. So 50% of our budget, 50% of our $3 million change, almost 50% of it is coming from special education costs. Okay, when it's 25% of our budget. Sorry about that label, we'll get that fixed.
Say that one more time.
Okay, so when 25% of our budget is special education costs, almost 50%, 48% of the change is coming from special education. Okay?
Yes.
And so, and as you see, NCTC is just a little bit different. It's about 2% greater than what it is of the budget. So sorry, Charlie, you were about to ask.
The percentage of change is all increase.
It's all increased. So if you took that $3 million plus, it's like a little over $3 million is from the current year's budget to what's being proposed tonight at a level service of 4.02%. Almost 50% of that increase is from special education. Okay? And then, so if I start looking at like what different things are we purchasing with that, if I go to the next slide, for all that $3 million increase, if you look at the gray, which is salaries, the red, which is health insurance, and the employee benefits, which is like a green, or Bree will help me. I am not good with colors, okay? There's some color, I won't call it blindness, but I have a hard time recognizing them and getting the right name of them. We're almost at 85% of our increase is for human resources. Not surprising. We're a human endeavor. We need humans to do our work. That's what our profession is. But then you can see that the next biggest thing is tuition, transportation, and property services. And I can tell you that property services and transportation both went down in the proposed budget.
Transportation.
Yep. Yep. So on the next slide, one of the things I wanted to do is like, what are the biggest increases in the budgets by both dollars and percentages? So I started looking at this and I went down to 100. Went back to the expenditure budgets and started to look at all, it's called departments in the budget. I'm not sure that's the right label, but all those different line items. The biggest increase is in direct instruction. But in dollars. But it's 5.14%. We are committed to a 4% salary increase for teachers, and you already know there's a 12% on health insurance. So somewhere between 5 and 6% if we just kept everything static and just had those HR costs. There are a few other things in direct instruction, but the majority is people. That would be what you'd kind of expect, at least I would expect, is right around that 5%, okay? So that seems like, oh yeah, okay, that's the increase, but it's a big part of our budget. That's, percentage-wise doesn't seem out of bounds, but it's good I just started picking these by dollars. Student supports, it's almost an $800,000 increase. It's a 33.4% increase in that line from this current year to next year. Out of district placement, you can kind of read this. You can read, I won't read the whole thing for you, about 415, it's almost a 23% increase from this current year to next year in what we're projecting. Students' transportation, Bree talked about how students' transportation and special education is linked to the out-of-district placement because we're usually transporting. So there's almost a 70% increase, $300,000. We talked about guidance. Guidance is a 5.38, so that seems kind of like where it should be. That's just, that incorporates a lot of folks. And then the curriculum instruction services, we have to look at some of the things that were coded there. And we just noted that today. So that we haven't had time to dive into that. And then operation, maintenance, and security, that 2% is actually very low. It's just that the number. I stopped at 150,000 on each line. And then if you go to the next slide, what are the biggest decreases in the budget by dollars and percentages? So special education, direct instruction. So these are the special educators. And are the paras in there too, Bree?
No.
No, so just the special educators. the teachers, and that's decreasing. And then regular education, the long-term debt, I want to point this out, Bree said it earlier, it's the bond. If we weren't trying to keep the budget as low as we should, the actual responsible thing would be to take that bond payment and put it into maintenance and upkeep of our buildings. But we're not doing that. And that's what's happened in Vermont, and that's why we have a $6 billion problem in Vermont in facilities, okay? So the district operations is down about 9%. That's all the core services, HR, business, public relations board, superintendent. That's all in that line. And you have all these definitions in your printouts. Psychological service, I can tell you why that's down is we plan to have 3 psychologists. We only have 2 psychologists, but we have a special ed teacher who's doing testing, and she's in the direct services because she's a special educator. Some of this is the rules of Handbook 2, the Vermont Coding and Accounting System, so we have to follow those. So sometimes, it's good to look at these and say what's causing it. So I'm trying to give you what's causing it. Student transportation, Bree, can you give a little bit of that? You found that savings there.
Yes. So in the student transportation, we have yearly we have increased it by like a substantial percentage of what the contract is, and then we've given all the other expense lines additional money. But we're not going on as many field trips, and the amount that we were budgeting was a little bit higher than what the contract is, so I was able to lower it down in that line, as well as looking at the other lines to make sure that those had proportional funds from FY24, FY25, and then for FY26.
So our estimates were a little high.
A little bit high.
So we readjusted those.
Yes.
Office of the Principal, there's some savings there. And then the technology services, the biggest thing I would say here is Martin Katom's done a good job of making sure we have a consistent hardware replacement cycle. So it's not, we don't see peaks and valleys, there's just a cycle of replacing the equipment. And at the same time, since Martin's been here, we've, when he came as a technology director, we had 12 FTEs in the tech department. We're now down to 8.8. He's found cross-school efficiency by working together. So we've been reducing staff, and I think part of that is a reduction in a staff member from last year, but I don't remember.
I think it's that, but I also think that it's combining softwares that we have and subscriptions throughout the district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have, it's actually quite alarming the rate of money we have to pay for subscription to keep our financial and student management systems and our data. We talked about Panorama. Just those 3 alone are well north of 6 figures for subscription, and we have to pay it annually.
Absolutely.
So that's some quick analysis of what's causing the increases and decreases. There, if you can go through and look at every line if you like. I didn't hit every line. I just wanted to look at some of the extremes on either. So Bree, I'll let you go to taxes.
Okay. So here is the tax rate calculation, the estimated tax rate calculation. Starting at the top, you can see that our long-term weighted ADM is 3,902.02. And then our budget expense is $79,296,204 with an estimated local revenue of $19,476,276, which is also reflected on those revenue sheets, to get education spending of $59,819,928 from the AOE. Actually, line 4 is the the equalized pupil of the 3,902.02, and then that brings down our estimated tax rate, estimated equalized pupil tax rate of 15,331, and then making our sorry everyone. Line 6 is our yield rate, which is also projected it's not set in stone. The yield does not get set in stone until June, right?
It's always the last bill of the legislative session, so it happens in May or June. So this is what the tax commissioner projects in the December 1 letter.
Right.
So we have our education spending per pupil, per weighted pupil of the 15,000, and those two get divided.
Yes. So, yes, our yield is projecting at 8,553 for the state of Vermont. So that brings it to our tax rate, or the education tax rate for Maple Run at 1.7924. And then we have the proposed, or the tax relief that was put in legislation last year at 0.0333. So we have a proposed education tax rate of 1.7591. Going down a little bit more is the common level of appraisal. And so St. Albans City, Town, and Fairfield, and Bill, can you help me out with this a little bit?
Yep.
We have a set common level of appraisal, but the way that the state of Vermont is calculating it is they're doing it by 72% of the common level.
So what they're doing is they're saying the state average of the common level of appraisal is at 72%. And so they take the municipality's CLA and divide it by the state's CLA. So for example, city has a CLA that's around 54% projected for next year.
Right.
So dividing that by 72 gets you what they're calling an SCLA. We need to change our title. I didn't catch this one either, Bree.
Okay.
Of 77% for the city. They do the same for the town, and it becomes 93%, and then for Fairfield it becomes 139%. It was a way of flattening the CLA so they didn't have as much effect on the tax rate as they did in prior years. A lot of this is just moving money from one place to another. What that does is lower the yield. They have to lower the dollar yield because the CLAs aren't as variable. So it's really just, all the money's in there. I have actually said, I've been saying, and I said this the other night in a couple different meetings, I'm just gonna talk about actual tax rates now. It's gotten so confusing, it's not worth talking about all these different pieces. So.
Yep. So the adjusted tax rate will then be, for the St. Albans City, 2.2846. Town is 1.8915, and Fairfield is 1.2655. So, which shows that St. Albans City would see a 4% increase, St. Albans Town would receive an 8% increase, and Fairfield would receive a 3% decrease in their tax rate.
So I want to let you know.
That's at 4%.
That's at 4%.
4%.
And I have the next page, I'm going to explain what it looks like at different levels of the budget. So we've been able to use this as a modeling tool and then put different, you keep the revenue stream, but change what the spending amounts are, okay? And I need to tell you that this is about it, we're running this as conservative as we know, so if revenues go up, and we confirm that, then the education spending will go down, taxes will go down. We've put in the lowest CLA, so we're trying to we don't want to say, hey, we thought it was this, and watch tax rates go higher. We'd rather go the other way. Okay, so we're trying to give you what we think is the worst case scenario. Charlie, did you have a question?
I think I know the answer, but so with factoring in the CLA, how confident are we in that estimate?
The CLAs were projected in the December 1 tax letters.
So we're using those.
We're using those. Are they going to change a little? They might change a little. Do I think they're going to change more than a couple percentage either way? In the CLA, not the SCLA, which is what we have to calculate here. I don't think it's going to change that much. So a 1 or 2% change in the CLA won't change the percentage you see on here, maybe 0.5%. So it's not that big a difference because of the divisor of that 0.72 that Bree was referencing, which is a statewide average.
Okay.
And we feel, because they actually said in their December 1 letter and they released all these numbers, usually we wait to December 31st. So the nice thing, of all the numbers, we usually don't get this until January. We have them now. So it's nice to have them earlier.
Yes.
So if we go on to the next slide.
Oh, I've
Yeah.
got a question.
Sure.
Absolutely.
When you look at the, that little block where it starts with homestead value,
Yes.
Yes.
my question is, when you go over to estimated annual impact, does that mean that those numbers are how your taxes are gonna change? Is that what that means?
It,
Like what is that for St. Albans town?
right,
Like a $300,000 home,
they could
is
see
the increase gonna be $391? Is that what that means?
It could be around there. I'm going to throw out that this is a huge estimation, and also with quite a few people on the
Income sensitive.
income sensitivity, yes, they might not see that entire impact.
But that's probably the high end if you had a $300,000 valued house and you didn't have income sensitivity. But they, we're trying to give estimates of what the impact is.
So what if you had a $600,000 home, what would that do?
So you would double that from 391, so it'd be almost $800.
I'm gonna move here.
We had it, we just had it before.
Exactly.
We're just taking turns. That's all it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
So, go ahead.
Actually, kind of along those lines, so St. Albans City has been doing its reappraisal, but that isn't anything that's going to have an impact on this year's taxes. The reappraisal is.
Yeah, from talking with the city council a week ago, they're not gonna have their CLA finished before June 30th, so it will not impact FY '26 taxes, it will impact FY '27. So, and I actually wanna be really clear on that, it will impact the tax rate. It probably won't impact that much on the total taxes gathered, because if I had a house that was $300,000 before reappraisal, got one that was $500,000, the rate went down, the rate looks better, but my total tax bill is probably not gonna change that much. Your house might go higher than my house, Charlie, because they might have reappraised it a different much, but they're still generally within the city or within the town or within Fairfield, have to gather the same total bucket of dollars of taxes.
Yeah.
So, probably not. And it's important, people think about the tax rate and they get their tax bill like, wait a minute, I thought, I saw this go down in reassessment, but my tax bill, your value went up.
Yeah.
So,
And just when we're talking to folks from the city about that, the reappraisal isn't a factor in our budget this year.
not this year, it's gonna be another year away.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the city, I'll talk more in my report about talking with the city councilors, because we were talking about that.
Oh.
Yeah. So on the next slide, one of the things you've asked for are these 3 different models of budgets, and what the leadership team, I wanna really thank my colleagues on the leadership team who worked hard on this last week, and you had seen it down to 2.5%, but we went all the way to a level funded budget, which is at a 4% cut. Again, we said, hey, we're trying not to show individual positions, but try to give areas, and it's kind of hard to give that specificity you want as a board, but vagueness to help protect individual people. So we're really trying to do that here. And then what I tried to show you is how many FTE at each level, and it's really, Bree was helping calculate costs, so these FTEs we feel pretty good about. And I gave you the total FTE as you're totaling down. And then you can see the tax impact. So if it's a red color, the taxes will decrease. Okay, so you see the actual tax rate and then the change in the tax rates in parentheses. So in a parentheses is not negative, red is negative, there's negative signs for negative rates.
I thought we weren't itemizing specific positions.
We've been trying not to do that.
I thought we were told we were not going to do that.
Yeah, that's what I've tried not to do here. So,
Do you not do it when you say unified arts teacher,
I'm not
Behavior
specifying,
sports.
I'm not you're right there, I'm not specifying, there's many unified arts content areas and many different types of teachers there.
Okay. I was under a different impression.
So I wanted to give this to you, so you had that, you asked for that, and trying to give you those pieces. And then the thing that we need tonight, the input we need from the board is, we've been giving you these models, but to really get accurate for January 8th, where we're gonna have a forum, we're trying to get more public to come in and ask questions, and so what we know we're modeling for you for adoption on January 15th. We'd like to have some direction from you tonight about which model are we going after tonight, and so that we can really hone in the budget pieces. And the next steps that we need to do from here, John, on the next slide, is, Bree, you want to explain what we need to get for data still that isn't in this budget?
Absolutely. So I've said a few different times already, we need to confirm the weighted students. They will freeze them soon. I believe it'll be after the new year. But once we have that, it will help solidify our long-term weighted ADM. And then as the Agency of Education pumps out the information to all of us business managers, I'll have the revenue projections a lot better. So then those won't be all as conservative as I have made them. And then actually at 3 o'clock today, the 6th semester average tuition tech center numbers came out, but I haven't had a chance to review that. So that will definitely be shown up in the January 15th meeting as well.
And then, as we, with what model you choose tonight, we'll talk more as a leadership team about impacts that will have on the school system, whether we have to do structural changes, or if there's less services, or what that would be. But we didn't want to get into that without, being down to one model. And that's what we have for you tonight. Sorry that was long, but this one usually is.
So Bill, just review the three models,
Yeah.
so I'm clear in my
Yeah.
head. One
Go ahead.
is it like zero funded? Is that the first model?
So the first model, yes, there's three models.
Right.
The one we presented to you tonight was level service. So there's nothing reduced, same structure as we have this year.
Okay.
The next one, and that's at 4.02%.
Right.
The next one you asked for was the governor's letter where he asked school boards and business managers to create a budget at 3% increased spending, which on this slide right here would mean the 1% cut. Okay? Because we're at 4.02, 1% gets us to 3. And then you asked for level funding, which means using the same budget bottom line at $76 million, which is the 4% line at the bottom. Okay?
So you're looking for some additional direction from us?
Yes, which level of the budget you'd like us to bring back on January 8th and have it all into one so that we can answer the question a little bit better on how does this impact the system if it's a level service. I mean, if it's a level service budget and there aren't any cuts, there's not much more to give because we're going with the same system we have now. If it's something different, we should be able to tell you how's that impacting, and we would bring that back to you.
So, just for clarification, if we look at the model that has a 4.02% increase, does that include the 23 positions that we've been carrying that are unfilled?
Yes.
Did you say yes?
Yes.
Is that what you said, yes?
Yes. Can you hear me, Milda?
Yeah, I can now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, it does.
And how much money does that represent?
I don't have that calculated right this minute.
We had said in previous meetings that that was approximately 1.6 million.
Right.
Which is approximately 2%.
Right, so if we were to eliminate cash them in, so to speak, we would be at a 2% budget, correct?
Approximately, yes, we'd have to do that math, but approximately.
So I think that's what we should do. It's 1% lower than the governor's recommendation. It's about 2% less than what you presented with that budget. And it's a, real good faith effort to reducing the taxes. And I think we had looked at that at one point, and I think if I remember correctly, that represented, I don't know, maybe I looked at it with you, Bill, but it represented a 9% decrease in taxes for Fairfield, a 3% for city, and then only a 4% increase for the town.
Yeah, that's changed a little bit since you and I looked at that, Nilda, because the weighted student numbers that come in. So you have to refer to the sheet with the tax rates and the possible cuts chart. That is up to date. Just because things have changed in the past 3 days. They're changing daily on us. I wish that weren't the case. It's just where we're at.
So if I look at that chart,
Yeah.
I'm looking at the 2% road.
Yep. So you would see that Fairfield would have $1.23 tax rate, about 6 cents down. The city would have $1.22.5. 20.
$2.
Just call it $2. Yes, $2.22, which is about a penny, almost 2 pennies up, and on the rate. And then St. Albans Town would be $1.84, about 8 cents up on the rate.
Okay.
So I've got a suggestion. The governor has put out 3% as his recommendation. And if we took the unfilled positions and we took a portion of those to bring it down from the 4% to the 3%. Then we would be able to say, we have reduced the budget down to 3%, which fulfills the governor's recommendation. There still would be, if the budget didn't pass for some reason, there would still be an ability to say we're not going to fill those positions. I'm assuming the positions we haven't hired are positions that the staff and the administration feels are needed. So I'm kind of against saying reduce the entire amount, but I think in the climate that we're dealing with, where the governor has made a recommendation, and I feel strongly that we should do whatever we can to get it to that percentage. And this is my opinion, but not reduce all those, the value of all those positions in one fell swoop, because then it doesn't give the staff the ability to fill some of those positions which might be critical for what children need. So anyway, that's where You know, I think the public is very well aware of what the governor recommends. You know, that's out there. So,
So I hear what you're saying, Jack. But I disagree. I think that we owe it to our communities who have been carrying those 23 positions for a couple of years. I think we owe it to them to do our due diligence and present a budget that is as low as possible for right now. And we all know that administration has ways to get positions filled over time if something comes up as a critical need. I would bet that 23 positions being open for 2 years are not critical, using that term that you just used. That's my counter to what you said, but let's find out where people are at, how they feel about this. Speak up.
It's a very hard needle to thread, and I think that like we definitely want to be at or under what the governor has suggested, but I don't know that. And I might be speaking out of ignorance for the state as a whole, but like the education system in Vermont is in really, really bad shape, and it's going to. I mean, it's like we're stuck together right now with basically paper clips and scotch tape, and the feeling that I have is that if every district in the state hits that 3%, then we're going to wind up with news stories coming out come tax times, like we did last year, where we had the 5% cap that everyone hit, where the state has put itself in an untenable position. If there's a way to get under that, then I think we should pursue it. The hard part is that the more we cut, the more we're making life harder for our students. So it's really hard to figure out where the balance is between how far can we cut and still provide a good education. And one of the other things that I want clarification on is we keep throwing out the 23 unfilled positions. If we cut 2% out of the budget based on the sheet in front of me here, where it's a total of 20 FTEs, and I think it's important to figure out what our language is on that, because I believe if we say cut the budget to 2%, we're not specifically saying eliminate all the open positions in the district. We're saying we're kicking. I mean, we have the power to say those open positions on School Spring, just get rid of them. But what we're doing really is we're kicking it to the administration and saying, reduce what we've got by 20 FTE and use your best judgment to do it. Unless we want to clarify that language. But like in terms of open positions, like for instance, we've got a middle school alternative program. Am I correct that one of those open positions is the classroom teacher we're trying to hire for that? So it's not just 23 positions that we're carrying around that we don't really need. So some of them are positions that we would still be wanting to hire, even if we cut it down to the 2%.
that's the exact reason why I'm saying 3% and not going down to 2%. Because if you take all of those positions, and I hear what Nilda is saying. I mean, Nilda's been a board member for, many years and, knows the sense of the public. So I respect that, but I'm just, if you go with a 3% and you haven't hired it, it's not like you don't hire the 10 people or whatever it would wind up being, but you can't hire you're still only spending 2%. You're still reducing your spending by another 1%. But you have the flexibility if for some reason the budget isn't passed. If you cut all those positions out of the budget and then the budget doesn't pass, you have no flexibility except to cut programs that are existing right now. I just do not recommend that. I mean, that's the danger. It's a risk, and the public needs to trust that we're going to provide a budget that our children need. If we have a bunch of extra things in our budget, we shouldn't have them there. We should only have things in our budget that are needed. But if there are those, if you understand what I'm saying, if you prepare a budget that reduces that 23 down to 12 or 10, and you keep 10 positions that you're trying to hire because the system, the administration and the staff feel they need those positions, you have that flexibility still there. If they're not hired for some reason because you can't find those people, then you're not spending that 1%. So it becomes a 2% spending level.
So, you know what, I think Charlie said it probably better than I did, because the reality is we're not going to tell administration exactly what to cut. What we would say is we want a 2% budget, not a 4.02% budget. And we know in our back pocket, and because we're educated on these positions, we know that those 23 positions kind of equal that amount. But I would leave the responsibility to administration to figure out exactly how to get it to 2%. I think that's a pretty good trade, because we know we have those positions and we know they haven't been used in 2 years. But we haven't specifically told administration, like get rid of this program or get rid of this position or get rid of whatever. We've always taken the advice of administration. So just thank you for that clarification, Charlie. I need to hear from more people, please. Otherwise, I call you out.
I tend to agree with Jack. And I think the key to it would be to educate everybody. If this budget doesn't pass, these are positions that are going to be cut and these programs will be cut. And if the voters come back and say that's what we want and they don't pass the budget, then that's what we have to do. But I hate to preemptively cut things that I consider important, and I'm sure the teachers consider important, without the voters being able to weigh in and really be educated at what's at risk if they vote it down.
Thank you.
I mean, I also agree with Jack. I think for staff morale, if we're cutting down to the bare minimum and it doesn't pass, then we have people working in our schools that are nervous that their jobs are going to get cut on that first pass of the budget. So I feel like after hearing Jack and hearing Nilda and Charlie and everyone that spoke, that getting down to 3% is a good place to start and see what happens from there.
So, am I concerned with hedging our bets against a budget being voted down is that it feels to me like we're not putting the best budget, or what the voters want, and they've said this repeatedly through every outlet that we have access to, plus elections, is that they want they want more affordable cost of living, regardless of what we do, the cost of living is going to go up, and the school budget needs are going to go up, which is why it's such a hard to hold a thread. But I don't like the idea of putting out a budget to the voters and saying, you know, with wiggle room in case they turn it back, because then it feels to me like we're not putting out the best budget that we can to meet what they want. And I don't believe that a voter who's going to vote against a budget is going to necessarily be paying attention to what positions what positions will be eliminated, and the more population. I mean, we saw across the state numerous budgets go down and then go down and go down after they cut and cut and cut, and I would rather not get voters in the habit of voting out a budget. I'd rather not be putting to the voters basically a first draft of a budget and saying, well, if you don't like it, then vote it down, because then that encourages them to continually vote us down, and then I worry that we would be going, we started 3%, they say no, we go to 2.5%, they say no, we go to 2%, they say no, and then we're below where we think that it's tenable. I don't mind putting a 3% budget out if we think that's what we absolutely need for the school, but I really don't like the idea of putting it out with the idea that we're saving some juice in case they shoot us down.
Thanks, Charlie. Anyone else? Anyone else?
So my argument to that is these are positions that people feel are needed. This isn't fluff. I agree with you, Charlie. If it was that we're just saving a bunch of jobs that we're really not going to hire, and it's just fluff in the budget, and we're saving it in case it goes down, that wouldn't we have room? I mean, I've been realizing that the people in Fairfield and St. Albans area support their schools. They don't vote the budget down. They care about what kids need. But I think of those 23 or whatever positions, there are going to be some that are more critical than others. And that to reduce all of them down to a 2%, to me, is dangerous, because some of those positions are needed. They just haven't been able to hire them. If for some reason they continue to not be hired, in a sense, the school is not spending that other 1%. They're actually spending at a rate of the 2%, even though the budget line is 3%.
They're charging the taxpayers the amount. They're charging the taxpayers for those positions, whether they're filled or not. Am I right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then the excess goes to the general fund, right?
Nope. It goes
Right.
goes into the capital
The
fund.
capital fund,
Yeah.
which then pays for the repairs of the building that is needed in every building. So it, which in a sense, it is maybe a savings, but also it would then go into repairs that buildings need that we are not budgeting for. So it's still going back to the schools. It's not, it's a need either way. It's either a need that we're spending on staffing, or a need that we're gonna spend on HVAC or windows or locks or
Sprinkler system.
whatever the building is needing, and we're not budgeting for right now in this budget
If
season.
the entire board feels that 2% is a good idea, I'm fine with that. I just was presenting a caution, okay? And I have little experience with this, like 50 years worth.
Joanna?
Bill, do you think that we can handle the 2%?
I think the 1-2%, because we have been living without them, we can get by with it. Do we need those positions? Yeah, we can use those positions. Do I think we can handle it? we've been living with it. I mean, I have to be a realist. We've been living without those 23 positions. Would it be better with them? Yeah, it would be better with them. I don't want to say that it wouldn't. It would be. Has it put stress on the system? Yes, it has. But we've been living without it for at least 2 years. I'd have to ask Becky. I know last year and this year's been around 23 to 25 positions. I don't know if you remember any further back in your data aggregation. But we could get prior years past those. So might be a simple yes, we could live with it, with those cuts. It would be better, it's that place of like, we've identified their needs, but we've been living without it.
Right.
My thought on that is if we cut them to, we don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Like, no one predicted COVID. And to cut down to such a bare minimum and not have, because the unknown is there. And then that way we won't be able to hire any staff for whatever happens. And yes, you can find money here and there, but going so low as to not having any cushion for vacancies is kind of scary, because we don't know what the future holds for our students. And yes, we live without it, but if something were to happen, we need to make sure that our students are taken care of at some point. So I kind of like the idea of kind of giving up half of it and say, okay, we've been living without 20 positions for round number. We have an open seat of 10 positions, so if anything were to happen, if there's a crazy population increase at some point and we need more staff, is to go down to where we can't hire and have the budget to allocate to hire right then and there is really scary.
Just be completely clear, there's, oh, sorry.
No, I'm still confused.
Oh, okay. Just be clear, there's no fluff in the budget. Like, even if we kept it at level funded, then we would still be underfunded because we're a school in Vermont, or a school district in Vermont. And so all of these are bad choices, and we're trying to figure out the balance between the least bad choice and what, everything has a trade-off. So if we go, and we luckily have this sheet in front of us that we can see, we have a chart that can show us what the impact is. If we go to 3%, we still have people in town, whose property tax goes up by a dime, which is for some families crippling. And if we go to 2%, then we can lower that, but we're also cutting more out of the district. The property tax and the opportunity for kids' education is tied right in, and so it's hard to, that's why there are 10 of us instead of like any one of us having to have a finger on the button and make the decision. But it's a tough decision, but whatever we do, there's going to be ramifications. We have to figure out where the best balance is.
You will have, this is not to let you out, so we want direction on which way to go, but you're not making the decision tonight. We're going to prep the 8th, and on the 15th, I'm just giving you the process. On the 15th is when you approve a budget that's going to the voters. So we're just trying to make sure as we take what you saw tonight, this is the first time you've seen a full draft, because everything else has been estimates. We'll be giving you that full draft.
So here's the thing though, I don't think there's been fluff in this budget for quite a long time. I think right now we're in a position where we can recognize an opportunity to give the voters a 2% increase that, as Bill said, we've been living with for 2 years anyway, or whatever years it is. And there are creative ways to hire people in. We've seen that happen in the short time that some of us have been on the board. That's what administration does. They're able to find monies to cover certain things. And I think we've been duly warned with how the budget passed last year. It was a very tight budget passing. And people have said, you gotta cut. And I don't want us to bleed, and I don't want us to cut programs, and I don't want to affect students. And I'm usually the person that wants to keep money in the budget because I hate to do this, but I want to pass the budget and I don't want to bleed passing it. And I think this is a responsible budget. And when I hear the superintendent say we can live with it, to me it's a no-brainer. But I will support whatever the pleasure of the board ends up being, of course, but I think we have an opportunity that I would hate to miss. Anybody else?
Well, I kind of stuck my neck out, so I want some of other folks to stick their necks out.
I'll go. I agree with Nilda. Being that we passed the budget by 55 votes last year, and the fact that we can fill this if we need to, I think that it would be a smart move for our communities.
I agree also with Nelda. 2% shows that we are listening to the voters. Not all of them have kids in the school, but we gotta respect that. And we can be creative in figuring it out.
I have one more question of Bill and Bree. Is there any category in the budget that we haven't given a hard look and thought about? Like, have we turned over every stone in this budget?
Bill and I went through the budget line by line.
Okay,
So I think we turned over every stone.
There was a joke going around, because I came into Bree at one point, and I'm like, I'm starting to look at items that are $7,500 in the budget lines. There are 5,800 lines in the budget. So we're down to, I stopped, Bree started laughing at me when I was getting below $1,000. She's like, what are you doing?
Right. So we can say we're 100% confident that we've looked at everything to figure out where we can cut.
Absolutely.
Or right, so a lot of, there are quite a few places we right-sized. You know, if we took the percentages of what we told everything that was coming, Bree talked about transportation was a right size. Yes. Like, okay, wait a minute, it's not budgeted right. Let's get it in there. The average in Vermont of budgets across the state are 7%. I will tell you, we got some of this out of here. One part of it is some bonds, but the other part is right-sizing some of the budget. Mm-hmm. So we are going to be a lot tighter budget than we ever have been before. Because we're getting them. And you said that. You said that when you get to the audits, and you're like, you know, we get $2 million. Now, $2 million in a $76 million budget is only about 3%. And I don't know many organizations that run on a 3% margin. They're usually a lot higher than that. So we're going to be closing that margin.
Right. So, I mean, like you mentioned, Bill, we don't have to make this decision tonight. This is a good discussion, and I respect everyone's opinion. We have a couple of weeks to ponder it, I guess, and as new data comes in, we can probably get a draft 3 that's even more precise. And unless anyone else has anything else to say about this, I think we need to move on.
I do just have one more comment.
Okay. Please do. Whoever first comment.
Excuse me. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to, maybe this is a better time to bring it up, but I think long term, we have to start looking at like these cost centers that are growing and growing and growing, and what we can do earlier on in a child's life, even before they're in the school system, so that they're coming to school ready and more regulated. And eventually those costs are going to decrease over time. And I don't know where that money would come from or what we can shift, but it's, you know, we're being impacted by things that are outside of the school system, but I think we need to invest in those areas more.
So Jess, I just want to caution you, those are actually under the direction of the Agency of Human Services. That's not under the education. We start at age 3 with education, and we don't start prior to that. So we have to be talking to our state partners on that.
Okay.
And DCF and so EEE does for birth for critical students and who are identified through physicians, obviously, as you just were alluding to, Joanna. But that's not all. And so we can't take education monies and put it into something that's a social service.
Is there like partnerships though that we can pursue or?
And that's
or
not really
anything?
within we work with people, but it's not like we go and we can't give them money to go do work. And right now what's happening is more of the social services in the state of Vermont each year is being picked up by the education fund and being pushed onto us from the agency of education. And there's a lot of that. We could get Stephanie Ripley to come in and talk about that. She lives a lot of that in her pre-K director role for us. So I agree that where some of the issues are, but what we heard tonight from our metrics here is 96% of our kids are doing our behavioral expectations. That's what the behavior data that came out. And so
it was like 78%.
that was 78%. That's the way the metrics on Panorama were set, not what our metrics are. And so that was saying that they didn't have a behavior incident. And we look more at the major behavior instances, not at having 0 behavior instances.
Then how does that, I mean, if our behavior is doing so well, then why are we still have to send out more and more?
Because our intensity is going way up. Our students that have needs are really getting intense. And I think about my colleagues who are sitting in the back and the ones who aren't here tonight that are in buildings, they're not talking to me about a lot of kids. They're talking to me about very intense kids. Alexis, you have something you'd like to add to that?
I think that kind of tracks with the data that we showed when we presented the proposal for the middle level program. The way to think about it is 4 to 6% of our students are consuming 90% of our resources. That's the kind of way to just think about it. It's not a number of kids.
When we talked about out-of-district placements, we range anywhere from $60,000 without transportation, just tuition costs, anywhere from $60,000 to $250,000 per student.
Right.
And we're getting more kids up in those over 100,000 than we've ever seen before. The intensity is just getting high.
What's that?
Oh,
sorry, hi.
Am I
Go
going in
ahead.
front of somebody else though? Yeah, I want to support also, all the information that John shared with us tonight in terms of what we can do when we are using the best curriculum and we're implementing it to the best of our ability and we're providing enough. So we're seeing incredible gains through that, and that's not throwing people at problems, right? That's getting everybody on the same page and making sure that we are providing consistent, best practice education to all of our students, the best that we can. So some of what we learn is how to do the best education we can the first time around, right? That tier 1 instruction, and we're reaping the benefits of that. So I just feel like I know I already said it, and some people giggled, but I think that I'm bummed. I'm bummed that we are looking at this Maple Run cut areas with positions on there, because I think that is drawing at the heartstrings of some of us tonight, and that's impacting our ability to make decisions. We had 23 to 25 positions that have not been filled for 2 years. I think it's even longer than 2 years, but we'll go with 2 years for right now. We know that, our public knows that. We are making improvements with specialized instruction. We are making improvements with specialized programming for students. I feel like we're doing such a better job of identifying the needs of our students and finding ways to be creative to address them. And I'm huge pro-education advocate, and at the same time, trying to be realistic with our community members and what people can afford. And I don't know that money is always the answer in terms of solving problems. It's also about getting creative and supervising and making sure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? And that goes a long way too. So I think that we can trust, we have to trust the people that we have hired to, if they say that they can do it within it, then I guess I believe that that can be done. And I still think that we're gonna see progress. But I think this is misleading, and I think this is a bummer for me tonight.
Thanks, Joe. Anyone else want to talk budget, or can we move on?
I think before we move on, we need to give direction as to where we're going with the budget. Whether we want that 3%, 2%, or some other percent, we have to tell the administration what we want.
Well, do you want to take a straw vote? I think we're split. I don't know what the numbers are, but I think we're split.
Anyone go with just throwing their hat in, doing like raised hands?
Great.
Yeah, that sounds good.
That sounds like.
So if you support a 3% budget, raise your hand. How many is that, 2?
3.
3.
3. If you support a 2% budget, raise your hand. I think you got your direction.
I did. We'll bring you back that. You have time to keep thinking about it. And we'll get the numbers clear.
Thank you all. I mean, I appreciate everyone is trying to do the best they can for students, and that's what we all want. All right. Next item is the capital plan proposal. This is a possible action item, and it's under attachment 7B, and Bill is going to speak to it.
Yep. Back on March 20th, we brought you a building update about facilities conditions and assessment and some needed items. The board had directed me to work with the facilities directors to bring back a proposal, approximately $3 million, and wanted to know what that would be. And so we put that together, and you'll see that in the attachment. You'll see there's work at BFA, at Fairfield, at Collins Pearly, at City School, which would require shutting down City School for the summertime because the fire alarm system, to replace it, we can't have kids in the school. We can have adults in the school, but we can't have kids.
What would that do with the 21C program?
We'd have to relocate it somewhere else. It just wouldn't be at City School. And then a little bit here at SATEC. We'd be doing work in all the buildings, but we're ready to go with these projects and we need to go out to bid, so I had to bring it tonight. I wish I had it a month earlier. It just took a while to get all the estimations correct of what it could be done. A lot of this is HVAC that you will see, or outside cracks in brick in a couple different places. And then, as I said, in City School, we're also going to go after some of the PCB windows at City School. We don't know that, it is in here. We're not sure we can get it done this summer, but after we know the unit at Fairfield that's in a closet that's causing our PCB issues up there because it's leaking fluid.
Cool.
We have it contained, everyone's safe, don't worry about it, we got it all set, but I mean, it's gotta go. So that's a PCB one that's in here, that's the one that's $372,000. So we're trying to get rid of those PCBs. What we're actually trying to do is get confirmation from the Agency of Natural Resources if we take out the source PCBs, that we don't have to continue testing. That's hard to get from the Agency of Natural Resources, that it's actually gonna work that way. I'd rather still keep testing and get them out of the buildings. So we know what it is. And some of those are pretty high cost because we've got to bring in experts to dispose of it properly. It's got to go all the way out to Michigan for disposal. So You'll see total cost there is almost $3.3 million. That would be from the capital fund. Bree, what I remember is we were at 5.4 unallocated. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
Of where we're at in their current capital fund. That's without FY24 coming in. So. You see Newcomb, I heard her just say that's close. The capital fund, usually we've been putting about 2 million in a year. So I can't confirm that's what's coming in for FY24 because we haven't got the audit back from the auditors.
Having $1.5 million in capital funds really cut it close.
Yep.
Yeah. Especially with such a big budget we have. Like, this is like 2% of our overall budget, so, yeah, that's crazy.
So if I would show you something that went up on the website, is when we were doing this work, we said, what are our critical needs? And our critical needs are $17 million for our buildings right now. These were the highest priorities that the facilities directors identified. And that's up on the website under the school budget.
I think JP, Aaron attached it to us.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you need a motion to approve that, or?
Yes, I would need a motion from this board to approve that and do that work.
I'll make
Do you need numbers in the motion?
Yes, just use what's on the bottom. Aaron can put those in too.
Well, there's no, my example doesn't have numbers, does it?
The administration recommends a motion to approve the capital plan proposal in the amount of $3 million. That's in the attachment. It may not be on the, it's not on the agenda, but it's there in the attachment.
The amount is
$3,289,185.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the capital plan proposal, for $3,289,185, you said, dollars? Presented, to be funded by the capital fund.
I'll make the motion, Akuma.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Any questions? We have to take a roll vote. Amanda,
Yes.
you approve the motion, Amanda?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Akuma?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Joanna?
Yes.
Carly?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
All the votes yes. Motion carries.
Did
Thank you.
Did you get Jessica?
Jessica, did you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Did I miss somebody?
No, you got it. I couldn't hear very well.
Okay. Okay, moving on, next item on the agenda is the middle school alternative program update.
Yep.
Bill?
Yes, we've been quickly, as you know, we were able to lease space on 38 South Main Street. We've been able to execute that contract, and we're trying to get ready to launch, as Alexis said, in mid-January. We know we need some renovations to start, and we knew we needed renovations that would happen throughout the year, through the summer, to get that space up to spec. It's a lot better than the Highgate Plaza that we had. I thought just to get us going, it would be under 40,000, but it didn't come in at that. And so it came in at 67,000. We know the total renovations to use it for everything that needs to be done through the summer is almost 150,000. You see 149,914. So I wanted to bring two proposals to you. You could go either way. If you do phase one, I've got to come back another time and have you. We went out to bids quickly, literally this weekend, and came back by yesterday. Or you could approve all the work that needs to be done in it. And so I wanted to give the board the option, but we're looking to get that. We're literally going to start tomorrow if one of these are approved. So we can get the program up and running as fast as possible. And like I said, I thought we could do it without having to come to the board. It's the $40,000 limit in the bid law. So
Who did we go out to bid, or you?
Let's go to.
you'll see that
Right.
this is T&M Construction right here. We went to Wright and Morrissey, and I'd
Oh,
have to
sorry.
bring my
Okay.
email up to remember the third. The problem was, Amanda, that what we had was how fast we needed to get this done. And it was, people were
Was
busy, and like, we
available.
can't ramp up that fast. So, that was the biggest problem, was trying to find someone that was available. But we didn't think these prices were out of the ballpark either from what we were getting. And Laz Skangus has been helping us run all of this. Laz has been very helpful.
So do you need a motion from us tonight too?
Yes, I need a motion for one of the two proposals.
This money is already allocated, right?
This would be coming out of the capital fund. You've already
Yes.
done that and reserved that, so when we said there was 5.4,
That's right.
you've already reserved this money.
Okay.
You did that back in August.
That's what I wanted to.
So you've already done that.
I say proposal 2. If you guys, everybody's in favor of doing proposal 2, so just get everything done out of the way. Instead of coming back once and coming back again.
If we, is there a time difference between one roses and another?
No, all I'm doing is saying,
Get started.
one gets us started, and then I've got to come back with basically the difference. The second one just does it all in one. It's basically coming to you with 2 motions or 1 motion. That's really
Well, let's get a motion on the table here and see where it goes. Need a motion to approve the proposed renovations for the middle school alternative program to not exceed a total cost of $149,914. I'll make that motion.
Second.
Second, please.
Second.
Amanda, got it?
Okay. Any more discussion?
My only question is, so proposal 1 is about estimating 68,000 in 2 phases, so that brings it to 136,000, if I'm doing my math right.
It's not, don't accept that it's partial in half. It's gonna cost us $150,000.
Okay, so the cost is the same,
It's just which
the
way,
timeline is the same, it's just whether we want to do it in 1 payment or 2.
one motion or 2, because I'm gonna come back for the rest.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I think we should just do it in 1. Done with.
Yeah.
So the motion on the table does it in one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? Are we ready to take a vote?
Ready for vote.
I think we're ready. Amanda?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Nakuma?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Joanna? No. Joanna?
Yes.
Carly?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
Milda votes yes. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right. We're up to new business. So we have the student enrollment and staff detail. It's attachment 8A, and it will be presented by Bill and Becky, I think.
Yep.
I
So,
didn't see.
yeah,
Is Becky there? I didn't see her.
yes, she is. She's here.
Okay, good. Take it away.
So I'm gonna just, for those of you who've been on the board, this is an annual report we give you that gives you the staff enrollment and projections going out in years. It's not in here, sorry. This is just our enrollment detail from the October 1. You've seen our estimates. This really isn't far off of what you've seen. And if you remember last board meeting, we gave you a Google Doc that was keeping all the data. So I know that Aaron's been working hard just to refresh this. What also is in here is class size data. You saw this earlier this year when you looked at the class size enrollment. We annually have it on our work calendar that we bring it this time every year. So we're really just following our work calendar. There are a few adjustments. I don't have anything major to point out, frankly, like there's some onesie Tuesdays here and there. So. and then I can hand it over to you, Becky, to talk about the staffing.
So on the handout that you have, or the attachment that you have, it's showing our staffing from fiscal year 18 through to fiscal year 25. You're seeing our teachers represented, the ESPs, non-union, and administrators, and you'll see that in a bar graph as well as the line graph, just to show you some of the stability here, and you'll see some minor fluctuations. I'll draw your eye to fiscal year 22, where that was the year we were coming back into the buildings following COVID, and hiring was just a nightmare, trying to get folks to come into the buildings following COVID. So you see that dip, but it pops right back up in fiscal year 23. Fiscal year 25, you're going to see 2 lines represented, one including those to-be hireds and one without the to-be hires. That number is fluctuated because it's a point in time representing data from October. Any questions?
Any questions for Becky or Bill?
Good job. Okay, that's more.
I'm seeing none.
I lost a little.
I've got it.
Thank you.
Charlie has a question.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see your hand.
I was very slow in getting in. Less about this and more about future predictions, but are there, on the horizon as we try to fill positions, we, hopefully don't run into, points where we just can't get the people that we need? Like, are there any sort of areas that we're concerned about in terms of, the ability to hire? Like, I mean, like, I know like paras are often hard to come by, for example. Like, are there those categories where we're sort of facing a potential crisis down the line?
No crisis, truly. I think paras and custodians, our custodial staff, it seems to be an area where we're really reaching beyond Franklin County to see who wants to come and work, at Maple Run, and we're leveraging different recruiting sites. Front Porch Forum is one. Social media is huge for us in several different avenues, but it's those two that seem to be right. Where are all our paras and custodians?
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Becky and Bill. Moving on to other business. We have the warrants. I'm looking for a motion to approve the warrants, acknowledging that passage of this motion will act as authorization and signature of any individual board member participating remotely. Can I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it, Nakuma.
Thank you. We're going to take a vote on that. Amanda?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Nakuma?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Who's my boy? Jessica?
Yes.
Joanna?
That was a yes.
Yes, please.
Charlie?
Yes.
Mary Ann?
Yes.
Suzanne?
Yes.
And Nilda says yes. Sound like a TV board around here. Next item on motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Next item is superintendent report. Bill.
Yes, there been a lot going on around here. You heard Jason talk about BFA experience. There was a great BFA arts night on Monday night. There's been the fine arts night that was there at BFA. I should say it's not just BFA; it's the whole district. there was a dance performance last week, and today was Unified Theater, which was great to see, the slippery slope of the missing slipper. It was a great performance. I got there this morning, and I know they did this afternoon. It was a great collaboration with all the kids. So there's many things going on as school's ending. I do want to point to two things that I was able to go meet with City Council last Tuesday night. It was last Tuesday or last Monday last week. Anyway, or somewhere last week. They're all melding together. And then this past Monday, I was able to go to the town select board, and Mary and I ended up been talking about the Fairfield. But if there are groups to go talk to, I think it's good. I've been actually, I think I presented the budget that we had at the last meeting. I wasn't trying to present tonight's meeting. And I got some good questions, but there was also understanding about where education is and how our system is tied in with the state versus the pressures that our property owners are feeling on taxes. So I didn't get any, I asked them for input as we've been doing input sessions. It was more questions and understanding of where we're at right now. But there was, I was pleasantly surprised by the support of both the select board and the city council for where the board is with your budget right now. So I frankly thought I would hear more resistance than I did. So.
It's great.
And they had great thoughtful questions. So those are good signs. I implore any of you, if you've got groups we can go out and talk to about it, I think it just helps giving people. And one of the things that I've asked the principals to think about is how can we reach out to the parents to ensure the parents know what is in this budget. I think that's a real key piece for us. So any thoughts any of you have for that? One of the things that I know Amy Miner did down in Colchester to get a $115 million bond passed is she had parents host gatherings in their house for other parents to learn about what it was. What is this bond package? We may need to be thinking about that with this budget as we get past the budget.
So Bill?
Yeah.
I've the city Democratic Party and the town Democratic Party are going to sponsor a budget meeting here on January 6th at 7 o'clock. I've already got the okay to use the library here. And there's a women's caucus that's also going to meet then that my wife's involved with, and it's some of the same people in both groups. But we're going to invite the legislators to at least Lynn and Joe, newly elected, and from the town and from the city, and go over the budget. So it's good to know, the consensus of the board and where we're trying to go, and so forth.
Yeah. No, you had told me about that, so I've got that on my schedule.
Yep.
It's January 6th.
January 6th at 7 p.m., 7 to 8.
Perfect. Thanks, Jack.
Yeah.
All right, any other board announcements? Hearing none, I'm going to move on to plan for board observations, and there was quite a litany of events, so hopefully some of you folks have been to some of those events and can write up a reflection form for them so we can have that data collected to show part of our goal management. Any board reflections, any commentary, anything?
I've got a
Charlie?
So just in terms of recent events, I went to the Aristocats performance at it's the first through fourth grade play in City School of the Aristocats, which is the Disney movie from the 70s, if anyone remembers that. And it was a great experience. Some of the things I noticed is the the program at City School is, they don't have as many resources as they previously had, but they have, the folks behind it have more experience, and that experience shows through very well in terms of some of the decisions that they made in the performance. Like either last year or the year before, they used a projection system for the backdrops, which didn't really work terribly well. They replaced that with physical props, which did work very well. And I was also happy that at the way the kids supported each other. I went both nights, and there were both performances, and there were some bloopers on stage, as there are for young kids performing, and the kids managed to just sort of keep things moving and make sure that no one kind of dwelled on a mistake or anything. It was a very good showing by young kids, many of whom were in the first play. I also went to BFA Fine Arts Night on Monday, which was fantastic. And the thing that, when I'm doing I'm turning my reflection forms to Erin, the things that I keep clicking on or checking off on are usually community engagement and rigorous academics, because the amount of the quality of the art that is put on display really shows through, and I know that takes a lot of hard work, and it is very, very clear that it takes a lot of work. The only thing that I kind of wish I had more of in that was for the still pieces of art that were on the walls. I wish that I could have seen like some sort of reflection from the student on their art process, but that is probably asking too much of very busy kids. And then I also went to the BFA experience last night, which was also, to echo what Jason said, magnificent in the way the teachers and the support folks put on their, it demonstrated what it's like to be at BFA. The teachers in the classrooms had, a lot of them had bullet point lists of what they go over and what you can expect kids to learn. And I got to ask questions on, some of it is, I asked a few questions about like how you teach certain subjects that are pretty tough, and they had some very good answers. And over at NCTC, the engineering room was, I particularly liked the way that rather than talk just from the perspective of an 8th grader going into 9th grade, they were addressing, if you want to be in engineering as a career, like you would need to make sure you take this course, this course, and this course. And they talked about it on a career level beyond high school, which I think is a good way to get kids thinking about what they want to be long term. So three recent things, and they were all great experiences.
Thanks, Charlie. Anyone else?
I just wanted to thank Mary Ann for bringing the cookies.
Yeah, those were a treat.
Nice. Nice. Thank you.
Well, that's nice. Sorry, I'm not there.
Jack ate your cookie, Milda.
Yeah, that's okay. I'm still in Tennessee, and we have cookies here, believe me. So let's see, any other business to come before the board? I want to thank you all for your participation tonight, and the meeting is adjourned.